A lot of people talk about how journalists for video games are unfair, they're cruel, they talk too much about woke this, anti woke that, and all this. But in all honesty, journalists nowadays aren't nearly as bad as they were back in the 90s and early 2000s because those guys were vicious. They actually pretty much brought down the company 3DO with how vicious they were. And that's the company that makes these. That made these Army Men. The Army Men franchise was 3DO, and that's also the same company that made the 3DO game system. So what I mean by that is that during the 2000s, so we're talking about like the time of like G4, Cinematech, and we're talking about like the PlayStation, PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube kind of era, and 3DO tried to go into the business to make a console. Well, that didn't turn out. They obviously didn't pan out for various different reasons, but one of the main reasons is just poor IPs and too high of a cost for the system, and they let different types of systems. Like it's a whole mess. It's a whole mess. You can always look at like a lot of people like Matt McMuscle and all of them made videos about why the 3DO failed. Well, after that, they did pretty much what Sega did, and they went into the software business, which is making video games. And that's where Army Men came into the picture. And Army Men's a phenomenal franchise. So it's a really good franchise with wonky controls. And I say that with a very light heart because the original Army Men games, so Army Men 1 and 2 and Army Men Toys in Space, are on the computer. So it's simple. It's mouse, spacebar, keyboard kind of thing. And the games are very fun to play. They're very simple. Well, they decided to expand their IP instead of just random toy games with no real meaning. They ended up making games around a specific IP, which is Army Men Sarge's Heroes. And Sarge's Heroes ended up being a pretty much a blowout. Like the first one did pretty good, the second one did extremely good, and they were expanding how they were doing that. Like they made Army Men Air Tactics, Army Men was it Air Assault, and that was around like the helicopter pilot from Army Men, and it's like they just did all of these expansion. They made Portal Runner, which is about Vicky, who was Sarge's love interest in the games, and they were doing pretty decent. But what ended up happening was that the game started selling less and less and less. And a lot of gaming journalists were giving them worse and worse and worse reviews. And the CEO for 3DO, before it went under, he specifically confronted companies because they were asking for more money to rate his games. Like they were essentially asking for bribes. And he told him no. he told him no, and the games pretty much started giving like these very hardcore negative reviews of every Army Men game back to back to back. And it ended up making his company go bankrupt. Like they ended up going bankrupt because all the negative reviews started to affect the people that were buying the games. And for the most part, the games never really changed in quality. So it's like the mechanics weren't to blame. You can't really blame the story because the story was pretty decent. And people just all of a sudden were claiming they were bad games. And it was interesting because like he specifically named like IGN, and he named a couple other companies in regards to this scenario. And after 3DO went bankrupt, he ended up like piecemealing the company into bankruptcy, and Army Men ended up selling to a company and then sell to another company. Well, one of the companies that ended up going to was Global Star Software, who made this, Sarge's War. And pretty much what Sarge's War was Global pretty much was making a love letter to the video game fans, and they were trying to make an ending for the Sarge's Heroes story. Because if you take Sarge's Heroes 1 and 2 and Portal Runner, it ended on a cliffhanger. So Sarge's War was an official ending for all the characters in that story. Which is nice, because it's not every day we get a franchise that gets pretty much blackmailed by other companies and end up going under and end up taking it apart. And normally the IPs just sit in limbo forever, like Dinosaurs. Like, Lord knows who owns them. We're never going to get an ending to that show. It's just sitting in some corporate vault in the sky, and they're just going to revive the IP in 40 years if they want to, but chances are it's not going to happen. So luckily we got an ending to it. And the Sarge's War game was on the like the GameCube era, so it kind of like snuck under the table kind of thing. But it's a good ending. It's a good ending for a great franchise that really needed the ending. And it sucks because a lot of people blame like recent journalists for how they feel politically, but it's not nearly as bad as what used to happen back in the day. Like back in the day, it was some Harvey Weinstein stuff. Like, it was just dirty, blackmailing, and like, you have to pay me for positive reviews, all that kind of stuff. But nowadays it's a lot more open because people can complain on Twitter. So it sucks to see that kind of thing happen. But on the other note, it's nice to see that things have gotten away from that. And this was the only real time I've ever heard about a journalist really screwing over a franchise, all because they wanted to get paid more, which is insane to me. Like, you're a journalist, you're reviewing games. Like, why are you doing this? But it's okay. Let's talk about how the modern people have politics. Nah, guys, you need to like really look into what journalism used to be before that generation walked out and the new generation came in, because it used to be a hot, crazy mess. All right, buddy. I hope y'all have a good day, and definitely check out this. Army Men Sarge's Wars is the official ending to that franchise. All right, peace.